My husband is betraying me and I used to say I did not care. That sounds strange when people hear it. My mother said it sounded crazy. From the first day of our marriage, I told my husband something very clear. If you ever want someone else, then leave me first. Do not lie to me. Do not sneak around. Do not make me live inside a fake marriage while you build a second life. I believe something simple. If another person can take you, then that person can keep you. If you are easy to pull away, then you were never really mine. My husband Kyle laughed when I said that. He told me he was mine forever. That was a year and a half before everything collapsed. By the time this story begins, we had moved into a penthouse not long before. We had lived there for only a few months. The same week we moved in, a woman named Madison moved into the apartment next door. She was young and beautiful and impossible to miss. Everyone in the building noticed her. She said she was from Ukraine. She said she was signed to a famous modeling agency. She told us her husband was much older. She said he controlled her money and made her ask permission to buy even basic things. She spoke softly and looked sad when she talked about him. She told me she envied our renovation. She said her husband would not let her change anything in their place. She said he told her she had no taste. Kyle jumped in right away and offered to let her help with our renovation plans. At the time it seemed harmless. I was working long weeks at my law firm. I often left early and came home late. Kyle worked from home, so he was around most of the day. It made sense that he and Madison would cross paths more than I did. At first it really did look innocent. She would bring coffee and chat about paint colors. She would give opinions about tile and lighting and furniture. She had energy and she seemed excited about design. I was exhausted most nights and grateful that someone cared enough to help. Then she learned that Kyle loved hiking. I hate hiking. She started joining him for morning trails. They would come back laughing and sweaty and full of stories. They had private jokes and shared little moments that made me feel like I had missed part of a conversation that never stopped. I noticed it, but I told myself not to be insecure. I told myself I believed in trust. Then she started cooking for him. She told me I worked so late and Kyle should not have to eat alone every night. She said where she came from, neighbors did not let each other go hungry. When I got home, there were often empty dishes from her place in our kitchen. She made soups and dumplings and chicken dishes that Kyle loved. Somehow she learned his favorite foods quickly. Too quickly. I asked once why her husband never ate with her. Kyle answered for her. He said her husband kept strange hours and worked late. He said she was lonely and he sounded protective when he said it. I heard that tone and felt something shift in me. Still I said nothing. Then one night I came home and found Kyle and Madison covered in paint while they worked on our guest bathroom. Madison was wearing one of Kyle's old shirts. They were laughing so hard that they did not hear me come in. When she saw me, she jumped and said I was home early. Then she smiled and said she would go because we needed couple time. After she left, Kyle kept talking about how talented she was. He said she had a great eye. He said her husband was wasting her. He sounded impressed. He sounded invested. I told my mother everything. My mother exploded. She said I was standing there and watching another woman take over my home. She told me to ban Madison from our apartment. She said if I kept acting calm, I was helping the problem grow. I told her if Kyle wanted to betray me, that was his choice. I said I was learning whether he was trustworthy. If Madison could take him with food and hiking and attention, then he was never truly committed. My mother called me insane. She said I was running an experiment on my marriage. Maybe I was. But I needed to know what kind of man I had married. Was Kyle really the man who promised forever? Or was he just another man waiting for someone more exciting? Then one night, everything changed. I came home very late after a client dinner. The penthouse was dark except for candlelight in the dining room. Kyle and Madison were sitting at our table. There were empty wine glasses on the table. Her hand was on his hand. They jerked apart when I walked in. Kyle started talking at once and said it was not what it looked like. Madison was crying. She said her husband had hit her and she did not know where else to go. She had a bruise on her cheek and a cut on her lip. I asked why she did not call the police. She whispered that her husband owned everything. Her visa. Her contract. Her life. She said if she reported him, she would be deported. Kyle looked at me like he wanted me to save the situation. He said he had offered her the guest room for the night. I looked at both of them. The tears looked real. The bruise looked fresh. But something felt wrong. I still told her she could stay. While she was in the shower, my mother called me. She said she had hired a private investigator. I could barely process what she was saying. Then she told me the investigator had been following Kyle for a week. She said there was no proof they had slept together. But she said Kyle was going into Madison's apartment every day while I was at work and staying for hours. I tried to defend him. I said maybe they were just friends. Then my mother said the investigator had photos. She sent them. I opened the images and felt my chest tighten. There was Kyle on Madison's balcony with his arms around her waist. There was Madison in a silk robe. There was Madison resting her head on his shoulder on her couch. There was Kyle fastening the back of her dress while she lifted her hair. Nothing in the photos looked like normal neighbor help. I was still staring at my phone when Madison came out wearing my robe. She thanked me for letting her stay and called me kind. Then she said Kyle was lucky to have someone so understanding. I smiled. Then I asked her how she got the bruise. She said her husband Ring hit her when he slapped her. I asked which hand. She hesitated and said his right hand. But I had seen her husband sign for packages more than once. He was left-handed. Then I asked when this happened. She said tonight. But I had seen his social media. He had been in Moscow all week at a conference. Madison's face lost all color. Kyle stood up and asked how I knew that. I told him I followed the man online and found it very interesting that he could hurt her from thousands of miles away. The room went quiet. Madison stopped crying. Then my phone buzzed. It was the private investigator. He sent a photo he had just taken from outside our building. The photo showed our bedroom through the window. Someone was inside going through my dresser. All of us were in the living room, which meant there was another person in our home. I looked at Kyle and asked who else had our keys. His face went white. Then Madison's phone rang. She looked at the screen and dropped the phone. The caller name on the screen was wife. Madison had told us about a husband, not a wife. I froze for a split second and then my lawyer brain took over. I grabbed Kyle's wrist so he would not run toward the bedroom and ruin everything. I pulled out my phone and called emergency services. I reported a break-in and said someone was in our bedroom right then going through our things. I kept my eyes on both Kyle and Madison. Madison's tears were gone. She stood in my robe with her arms folded and watched me with a hard calculating look. The emergency dispatcher told us officers were coming and asked if we were in danger. I said we were staying in the living room and the intruder was in the bedroom. She told us not to move and to keep the line open. Madison bent down to get her phone. I told her to leave it. She stopped. Then she sat on our couch and waited. Kyle was shaking and asking what was happening. I told him we were about to find out. The next few minutes felt endless. No one spoke. We could hear small sounds from the bedroom. Drawers opening. Things moving. Then we heard sirens outside. I let the police into the building. They came in fast and armed. I pointed down the hallway. 2 officers went toward the bedroom. Others stayed with us. We heard yelling from the bedroom. Orders to get down. More officers ran past us. An officer brought out a man in handcuffs. He wore black clothes and carried a camera bag. He claimed he was building maintenance checking a leak. The officers found a phone full of photos. Not random photos. Photos of my legal files from my home office. Photos of client contracts and financial records. There was no leak. There was theft. When the police sat him down and started asking questions, I looked at his face and recognized him. I had seen him in the lobby. He had signed in as Madison guest before. I told the officers. Madison went pale. Kyle looked like he could not breathe. The officers asked if I was sure. I told them to check the building logs. Another officer came from my office area holding evidence bags with my files. He asked if the documents were mine. I said yes and explained they were confidential client files from my law practice. Then the officer asked Madison if she knew the man. She did not answer. Kyle asked too. She stared at the floor. When the officer repeated the question, she finally nodded. The room was so quiet I could hear the police radios crackle. I asked to see Madison's phone. She refused and held it to her chest. An officer suggested she leave because this was now police business and she was not involved. I spoke up immediately and told them she had just received a very suspicious call right before we found the intruder. I told them the caller label on her screen said wife. The officer took her phone carefully and looked at the call log. The call was there. Saved as wife. He asked her to explain. She said it was complicated. Kyle looked at her like he had never known her at all. The officers asked again about the man in handcuffs. Madison finally said he was her brother-in-law. She claimed she had no idea he was in our apartment and said she had not spoken to him in weeks. The story made no sense. Why would her brother-in-law break into our home and photograph my legal files? Every answer she gave created more questions. Kyle's voice was shaking as he asked why she lied. She said nothing. I called my mother and told her to come now and bring Thea. Thea was the investigator my mother had hired. My mother said they were already on the way. More officers arrived and started processing everything. They photographed the apartment. They collected evidence. They separated us for statements. Madison sat on my couch looking trapped while an officer questioned her. Kyle stood by the windows telling another officer that he had given Madison our door code for emergencies. That sentence felt like another blow to the chest. He had given her our code without telling me. I was in the kitchen giving my statement when my mother and Thea arrived. Thea walked in and immediately started asking the kind of questions that made it clear she was seeing a bigger picture than the rest of us. She asked about Madison's background and routine. She asked about the older husband's story. She asked about the model agency. She asked what documents the intruder was photographing. The detective let Thea look at the photos on the intruder phone. She went through them and her face changed. Then she told me something that made my stomach drop. The man was not taking random documents. He was targeting files linked to specific clients. All of them wealthy people in complicated divorces. This was not a crime of opportunity. This was planned. The target was my work. Madison tried to leave and the officers told her to stay seated. That was when I noticed something else. When she was stressed, her Ukrainian accent faded. She suddenly sounded American. The detective noticed too and asked where she was really from. She stumbled over the answer. Then Kyle confessed something that somehow made the whole night worse. He said Madison had told him a different story 2 weeks earlier. He said she told him she was actually married to a woman named Alexia and not a man named Victor. She had told him the husband's story was fake because her agency would not accept her being gay. She begged him to keep it secret until she could safely come out. Kyle believed her. He never told me. He thought he was protecting her. Everyone in the room stared at him. Thea asked if he had ever met this wife Alexia. No. Had he seen proof of the modeling contract? No. Had he ever met Victor? No. One question after another, and he kept shaking his head. Thea looked at me and I understood. Madison had studied my husband and found exactly how to use him. She used his need to be helpful. She used his need to feel trusted. She used his ego. She used his softness toward a person who seemed trapped and wounded. She used all of it to get into our lives and into my home. The detectives kept working and things became even worse. They searched my office. My laptop was open even though I always closed it when I finished. The browser history showed searches I did not make. My clients' names. Their companies. Their spouses. Settlement figures. Financial details. Someone had sat at my desk and looked through confidential information. The detective asked if anyone else had access to the room. I started to say no and then stopped. Kyle admitted Madison had been alone in our apartment several times while he ran errands. He admitted he had given her the door code weeks earlier. The detective wrote it all down, and his face showed exactly what he thought of that decision. When he questioned Madison more directly, her stories finally started collapsing in public. She admitted Victor was fake. She admitted the social media account was fake. She admitted the abuse story was fake. She admitted the bruise was makeup and the cut on her lip was self-inflicted. She admitted Alexia was real and was her wife. She admitted the man in handcuffs had come for documents. She tried to claim she did not know the plan for that specific night. No one looked convinced. Kyle stood there listening with a destroyed look on his face. He had believed every word she told him. He thought he was rescuing someone. Instead, he was helping a criminal operation break into our home and steal from my clients. The detective asked if Kyle and Madison had been physical. Kyle said no very loudly. Then the detective asked how often they spent time alone. Kyle admitted it was frequent. Morning hikes. Renovation work. Dinners while I was at the office. Months of daily contact. I looked away because I could not process his guilt and my professional panic at the same time. The detective made a call and then officers arrested the intruder and detained Madison as a possible accomplice. When they led her toward the door, she looked back at Kyle. For one brief second, her face changed. There was no fear. No sadness. Only calculation. She was checking whether he would still defend her. Then the tears came back like a switch had been flipped. After the police left and the forensic team finished in my office, it was just me and Kyle and my mother and Thea sitting in the wreckage. It was around the middle of the night. I had to call my firm. I called a senior partner and explained everything. An intruder in my home. Confidential client documents photographed. My laptop accessed. Possible breach of privileged information. He asked which clients. I told him. His silence told me all I needed to know. He said we would have to notify the clients and assess the damage first thing in the morning. He did not yell. The disappointment was worse than yelling. After I hung up, I felt the full scale of what had happened. This was not only about my marriage. This was not only about a neighbor and lies and cheating. My career was in danger. My client's trust was in danger. Everything I had worked for was now tied to a criminal scam and my husband's terrible judgment. Thea explained more of what she and her partner had already found. They had been tracking Madison for days after my mother hired them. They had seen her meeting with the same people repeatedly. They had seen her studying our building layout. They suspected she was planning something bigger than an affair. Now we knew they were right. The next morning we found more proof in my office. Browser searches. Open files. Signs that someone had gone through drawers and put things back carefully. We cataloged everything. I barely slept. At sunrise I showered and put on my best suit like armor and went downtown to my firm. I sat in a conference room with partners and the security director and explained every detail. They asked hard questions and I answered them honestly. How long did she have access to my home? Did I discuss client matters at home? Were physical files unsecured? What protections were in place on my laptop? Could she have watched passwords being entered? Did I ever leave her unsupervised near my office? Each answer felt like another cut. The security team took my laptop for a full forensic review. The firm prepared to notify affected clients. I could feel my partnership track sliding away while I spoke. Then I went home to face Kyle. He was waiting in the living room and started apologizing before I even put my bag down. I stopped him. I told him to pack a bag and go to a hotel while I decided what came next. He said nothing physical happened with Madison. I laughed. I told him that was not the point. He let her into our home. He let her into my office. He kept secrets. He gave away our security code. He made himself her confidant while I was working and trusting him. The betrayal was already complete whether they slept together or not. He cried and said he would do anything to fix it. I told him the only thing he could do right now was leave. After he left, I changed the locks and the access code through the building app. It took only a few minutes to erase him from the systems. It was a brutal kind of clarity. Then my friend Mia from the firm came over when I finally admitted I did not want to be alone. She brought folders and her laptop and helped me build a timeline for the internal investigation. We listed every interaction with Madison. Every visit. Every odd question she asked. Every moment that seemed friendly but now looked like surveillance. We matched building guest logs with my work schedule to show when she had access without me present. As we worked, I started seeing the pattern more clearly. She had asked about my morning routine. She had asked which clients kept me late. She had asked about security and deliveries and building staff. It was never random curiosity. It was intelligence gathering. That night, the detective called with a major update. Madison was not who she said she was. Her real name was Madison Bokoff. She was wanted in other states for similar crimes. In other cities, she had used the same pattern. Move into a building. Befriend a target. Build trust. Create a fake victim story. Gain access. Steal confidential information. Alexia was real. Alexia was her wife and partner in the scams. I did not feel relieved. I felt sick. Being targeted by professionals did not erase my mistakes. It only made me see how carefully they had chosen me and how perfectly they had used my beliefs against me. The next day, the detective sent a report about Madison's real background. No model career. No elite contract. No victor. No abusive husband. No true accent. No real tears. The whole identity was built for our building and our operation. Even the conference photos used in the fake husband account were stolen. I sat at my kitchen table reading it and cried. Not because I still believed her. Because I had wanted to believe that at least some part of it was human. There was almost nothing human in what she did. It was performance. Thea and her partner Holden came over later and showed me more surveillance photos from before the arrest. Madison meeting Alexia and another man in coffee shops. Papers spread out on tables. Floor plans. Security schedules. Lists of names. My name on one list. They had picked us on purpose because of my work and the kind of information I brought home. Bertram the intruder had already been inside our building before. He had entered wearing maintenance uniforms on earlier occasions. We were one target among several. I met with building management and learned Madison Lease had been paid in advance through a shell company. Her background check was fake from top to bottom. Fake work references. Fake credit. Fake history. Other residents had reported strange incidents too. Stolen card information. Fraudulent accounts opened in their names. Small security breaches nobody connected at first. Madison and her crew were working the whole building. At the firm things got worse before they got better. I sat through long internal interviews and risk assessments. 3 clients demanded answers. 1 threatened to sue me and the firm. Another wanted a full breakdown of exactly what was accessed and what new security controls were being implemented. Another was furious that I had taken work home at all. None of them were wrong. I answered everything and accepted every criticism because I had no defense that mattered. Kyle kept calling and leaving long apologetic messages. I sent every call to voicemail. We communicated only by text about logistics and bills and when he could get his things. My mother wanted me to file for divorce immediately. I told her I could not make that decision while my career was on fire. Then the detective found more. He and his team searched Madison's apartment and uncovered hidden cameras and fake identities and folders on multiple residents. There were files on our schedules and jobs and visitors. My file was one of the thickest. There were emails between Madison and Alexia discussing which targets had the most valuable access. My name came up often because high-asset divorce clients meant financial records and strategic information. Madison had requested me after researching my firm online. Everything with Kyle had been engineered. She learned his hiking routine by following him and pretending the encounter was chance. She learned his favorite foods by checking our trash and seeing takeout containers, then teaching herself the recipes. She used kindness as bait and helplessness as a key. Nothing was accidental. Nothing was real. I met with clients to disclose the breach and the possible exposure of information. Those meetings were some of the hardest of my life. I had to tell powerful people that I had failed to protect what they entrusted to me. One client was angry but controlled. One was understanding but deeply disappointed. One threatened legal action on the spot. I offered to step away from any case if they wanted new counsel. I sat there and accepted their anger, because it was deserved. The detective later told me Alexia had escaped after Madison made warning calls in the time before police arrived. They started tracking money and communications. It looked like a sophisticated interstate operation with shell companies and digital currency and encrypted apps. Madison may have been caught, but the mastermind had run. The next few weeks were a blur of hearings and risk meetings and sleepless nights. I came home to an apartment that no longer felt safe. Every room held a memory of deception. The kitchen where Madison cooked strategic meals. The guest bathroom where she and Kyle laughed while planning who knows what. The dining room where they sat by candlelight. The living room where she cried with fake bruises. My old philosophy about trust felt thin and childish. I had told myself I was evolved because I refused to be jealous or controlling. Now I saw that I had confused trust with the refusal to set boundaries. Kyle asked to meet and talk. I finally agreed because I needed to hear him explain himself. He cried and said he truly believed Madison was a victim. He said he thought he was being kind. He said he never meant for any of this to happen. I told him kindness does not require secrecy. Kindness does not require spending hours every day in private with another woman while hiding the depth of that relationship from your wife. Kindness does not require giving out your home security code without asking your spouse. He kept returning to the same defense. Nothing physical happened. I told him again that this was not the point. He made Madison more important than our marriage. He chose her stories over transparency with me. He created a secret emotional world and protected it. My old rule about cheating had been incomplete. I had only thought about physical betrayal. I had not fully understood emotional betrayal. I had not understood how secrecy by itself can rot trust from the inside. At work I faced consequences. The partners did not fire me, but they removed me from major cases for a period of time. They required extra security and ethics training. My partnership track was delayed. They said they still valued my work, but the firm reputation had taken damage and trust had to be rebuilt. I accepted everything. I had made mistakes even if I had been manipulated. I cried in a bathroom afterward where no one could see me. A few weeks later, I went to Madison's first court appearance. She looked smaller in jail clothes, but no less calculating. Her lawyer tried to present her as a victim controlled by Alexia. The prosecutors had evidence showing Madison's active involvement in target selection and planning, phone records, messages, surveillance. My testimony at a preliminary hearing forced me to walk through how she gained access to our home and my life. I described the coffee visits and paint advice and hikes and dinners and the fake abuse story and the fake accent and the moment her tears stopped when she realized I caught her. Her lawyer tried to paint me as a jealous wife. I said I was not jealous. I said I had been testing my beliefs about trust and discovered both that my husband failed and that my neighbor was a criminal. Kyle later sent a long email taking responsibility. No excuses. No blame shifting. He offered money to cover legal costs and client claims if needed. He admitted his choices enabled everything. I read it several times. I believed he meant it. But sincerity did not repair the damage. I saved the email with the rest of the documentation and moved on. Thea later showed me records from other cities. Boston, Seattle, Denver, Atlanta. The same pattern over and over. Madison and Alexia renting in upscale buildings and targeting professionals with access to valuable information. Doctors, lawyers, investors, accountants. The operation had been running for years. I was not uniquely foolish. I was one person in a long line of carefully chosen victims. That fact hurt and helped at the same time. It did not erase my errors, but it took some shame off my shoulders. My mother came over one weekend and cleaned my temporary place while I sat there numb. When I finally talked through the whole story from start to finish, she listened without interrupting. She did not say I told you so. She just stayed. The detective later gave me one small piece of good news. They recovered most of the stolen client data from cloud storage before it could be sold or widely used. That reduced some of the practical harm, though not the breach itself. I called each client again to update them. Some were relieved. One remained furious. Again, I did not blame him. The firm said this development helped but did not erase the consequences. The damage was contained but still real. Mia pushed me to see a therapist, and eventually I went. In one of the first sessions, I said my biggest mistake was trusting Madison. The therapist gently disagreed. She said trust itself was not the problem. The problem was rigid thinking. I had turned a philosophy into a rule and stopped using judgment. I believed in autonomy and non-control so strongly that I ignored boundaries and verification even when the stakes were high. She helped me see that mature trust includes caution. It includes faith and evidence together. It includes protecting what matters. That idea changed something in me. Madison eventually accepted a plea deal and agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. She gave information about the operation and other people involved. Alexia was still missing for a while, and that angered me more than I expected. Madison had harmed me directly, but Alexia was the architect. She built the scam and used Madison as the face. Kyle and I met again to talk about our marriage. He asked for counseling and another chance. I told him I did not know if I wanted to save what we had. Trust was not cracked. It was gone. He said he was in therapy and trying to understand why he needed to feel like a rescuer. I believed he was trying. But I also knew understanding why he failed did not undo the failure. My mother later admitted she had hired Thea so quickly because she had seen a similar scam hurt a friend years earlier. She recognized the pattern before I did. That shook me. I had thought she was just being controlling. In truth, she was protecting me with knowledge I did not have. For the first time, I thanked her for interfering. It may have saved my career from complete ruin. I filed for legal separation first rather than immediate divorce. I told Kyle it was not punishment. It was protection. I needed space to think without his presence clouding my judgment. He cried when he was served the papers. I felt tired more than angry. Movers came and took his things while I stayed away. When I came back, half the home was empty. I changed every lock and code again and walked through the rooms trying to name what I felt. Relief. Loss. Shock. Maybe all of them. The building held a resident meeting after everything came out. Management announced new security measures and stricter screening. Some neighbors thanked me awkwardly for helping expose the scheme. Others whispered as if my life choices had brought danger to the building. Both reactions were hard to hear. I threw myself into work. I took difficult unpaid cases nobody else wanted because the work gave me structure and left less room for panic. Mia stood beside me through all of it. She protected my space at the firm when people gossiped and helped me stay focused. Then one day the detective called with news I had not expected. Alexia had been arrested at a border crossing with fake documents. The broader investigation linked her and Madison to many more crimes across multiple states. The prosecutors later asked me to testify at Alexia trial about what happened and how it affected my life and career. I agreed. In court, Alexia looked composed and cold. Her defense tried to paint her as an innocent spouse who did not know what Madison was doing. The prosecution tore that story apart with records and messages and testimony, including from Bertram. I testified about the access to my home and office and the consequences that followed. Alexia's attorney tried to suggest my poor security made me responsible. I acknowledged my mistakes and made clear that mistakes are not consent to criminal exploitation. The jury convicted her on all counts. At sentencing, she received a long prison term. Madison received a shorter but still serious sentence. The judge said they had turned human decency into a tool for theft. That line stayed with me. It captured the deepest injury. They did not just steal data. They used kindness as a weapon. After sentencing, Kyle texted and asked to meet for dinner to discuss final divorce terms. We met at a neutral restaurant and spoke like two tired professionals closing a file. He had changed. Thinner. Quieter. He told me about therapy and said he now understood he was more attached to feeling like a good person than actually acting like a good husband. It was insight. It might have mattered earlier. By then it mostly felt sad. We divided assets calmly. We agreed to sell the penthouse and split the proceeds. There was no fight over furniture or small things. Too much bigger damage had happened for us to care about objects. He asked once more if there was any chance for us. I told him honestly no. Not because he was evil. Because too much trust had been burned and I did not want to rebuild from ash. The divorce became final months later. When the papers arrived, I signed them without crying. I filed them away and felt relief. At work, the rebuilding was slow. The partners eventually offered me a path back to significant cases, though partnership remained delayed. I accepted and worked quietly. Mia made partner, and in her speech she thanked me for what I taught her during crisis about owning mistakes and maintaining integrity. Her words helped repair my reputation in ways I could not have forced. Over time, referrals started returning. Not all at once, but steadily. I moved into a smaller apartment in another neighborhood with better security and no memories in the walls. My mother helped me move and decorate and never once used the moment to lecture me. I slept better there than I had in months. Later I ran into Kyle by chance at a coffee shop. We talked for a short time and for the first time it felt almost normal. He was dating someone. He looked healthier. I felt no anger and no longing. Just distance and a little kindness. Thea and Holden became unexpected friends. They told me that exposing Madison and Alexia helped law enforcement connect and break wider networks using similar methods. Knowing my disaster helped protect others gave some meaning to the pain. A lawyer from another firm later reached out because she had been targeted by a different con artist and now faced ethics complaints after confidential files were accessed. I met her and saw the same shame I had carried. I shared everything I had learned about documenting manipulation and showing that sophisticated deception can defeat ordinary safeguards without making the victim stupid. Helping her was one of the first moments I felt I had turned my own collapse into something useful. Over time, my relationship with my mother grew stronger. We had dinner often and talked honestly. She never gloated about being right. She simply showed up and kept showing up. That mattered more than any speech. My view of trust changed completely, but not in the way I once feared. I did not become cold. I did not stop believing in people. I just stopped believing that trust means no boundaries. Now I verify. I watch patterns. I protect my professional life carefully. I do not let a philosophy excuse me from basic caution. I still believe in autonomy. I still believe adults should be free. But I also believe shared lives need shared boundaries and transparency. Those ideas can live together. Eventually, the firm restored me to full standing. A long time after the break-in, I was assigned a major high-value divorce case again. At first, I felt fear because the situation echoed what I had lost. Then I realized I was better prepared than before. I understood how people target professionals like me. I knew what vulnerabilities look like. I knew how to protect confidential information with more than standard procedures. I built stronger systems for client security and was open with clients about why I took these measures so seriously. Some respected me more because I had been through failure and learned from it instead of hiding it. One major case went to trial and I handled it with a level of discipline and preparation I had not had before. Every document was tracked. Every access point was secured. Every risk was considered. We won. The referrals that followed were not only because I was good at the law. They came because people trusted how I handled crisis and how honestly I spoke about mistakes. That trust felt different from the old version. It felt earned and tested. Years after that night when Madison phone lit up and the false story broke apart, I sat in my apartment reviewing files and felt something I had not expected. Contentment. Not the old kind built on assumptions. Not the brittle confidence that comes from thinking bad things happen only to careless people. Real contentment. The kind built after loss and repair. My marriage ended. My career took serious damage. My reputation was shaken. I was manipulated by professionals and betrayed by the person who should have protected our home with me. All of that was true. Another truth was this. I survived it without lying to myself. I took responsibility for my mistakes. I changed what needed changing. I rebuilt what I could. I let go of what I could not save. And I learned that trust is not blind faith and not total control. Trust is openness with judgment. Kindness with boundaries. Belief with verification. I used to think my philosophy about cheating proved I was enlightened. Now I think wisdom is simpler and harder than that. You can love people and still protect yourself. You can be generous and still ask questions. You can refuse jealousy and still demand honesty. You can be kind without giving strangers access to everything that matters. If there is one thing this whole disaster taught me, it is that betrayal is not always a dramatic affair in a dark room. Sometimes betrayal looks like small daily choices. A secret kept because it feels harmless. A code shared without asking. A friendship hidden because it seems easier. A boundary dismissed because no one wants to look controlling. That is how trust erodes. Quietly. And rebuilding it also happens quietly. Through systems and habits and hard conversations and repeated honesty. My husband cheating was what I thought I was testing. But the real test was much larger. It tested my judgment. My pride. My beliefs. My career. My ability to adapt when my ideas failed me. I did not pass every part of that test at first. But I learned. And that learning became the foundation for the life I have now. So when people ask if I still believe what I once said about cheating and leaving and not sneaking around, I tell them yes and no. Yes, because deception still matters more to me than desire. No, because now I understand betrayal can happen long before sex. It can happen the moment a partner starts building secrecy with someone else and calls it kindness. It can happen when one person starts protecting an outsider feelings more than the marriage. It can happen when your home stops being a shared space and becomes a stage for hidden loyalties. I know that now. I know many things now that I wish I had known earlier. I know my mother was not crazy for seeing danger where I saw philosophy. I know my husband was not only fooled but also willing in ways he does not like to admit. I know con artists study emotions the way lawyers study evidence. I know shame grows in silence and shrinks when spoken plainly. I know careers can survive terrible mistakes if you tell the truth and do the work. I know that being targeted by professionals does not make me weak. I know that failing to set boundaries does not make me noble. And I know that starting over can be brutal and still be the best thing that happens to you. I am not grateful for what they did. I am not romantic about suffering. I would never call this a gift. But I am grateful for what I became after I stopped pretending my old rules were enough. I became sharper, calmer, more honest, more careful, less performative in my ideas about trust, more grounded in reality. That is the story people do not expect when they first hear me say that my husband cheated and I said I did not care. I did care. I cared deeply. I was just looking at the wrong question. I kept asking whether another woman could take him. The better question was whether we had built a marriage with real boundaries and mutual protection. The answer was no. And once I saw that clearly, everything else followed. The lies, the arrests, the career fallout, the divorce, the rebuilding, the wiser life on the other side. Now when I meet someone new, I still choose trust. But I choose it with open eyes. I do not hand over the keys to my home or my work or my peace because I want to prove I am secure. I do not confuse silence with maturity. I do not worship my own philosophy. I stay curious. I verify. I pay attention to patterns. And I remember that true confidence is not pretending danger does not exist. True confidence is knowing I can see it sooner now. And if it comes again, I will handle it better.